As leader of the Labour Party, I want to add mine and my party's support to this very important piece of legislation, and I want to thank Deputy Kenny for bringing forward this bill. I want to commend you for it tonight, as I have done in private on a number of occasions. I also want to take this occasion to acknowledge the work of former Minister and Deputy John Halligan, who sat up there, and I remember who ploughed a lonely furrow for a considerable period of time, and I hope he's watching, because I just want to acknowledge his work tonight, and he's still advocating. It's very much vital that this issue is handled very sensitively, no matter what anyone's view on it is. It's obviously quite an emotive topic, and many people have differing views. In fact, I've met people who've changed their views in the last week. I respect where the government has come from. I respect the conversations we've had. I don't agree with the position of the government in relation to pushing this on for a year. I think in COVID and everything, it wouldn't materialise. But I do appreciate the sincerity by which it was put forward. I want to put that on the record to the government ministers tonight. At the end of the day, we are legislators, and we have to legislate, and this issue is something that we must legislate for now. This isn't a perfect bill. This is really what we're doing tonight, is we're putting forward our principle that we need to deal with this as legislators. There are a number of issues with this bill which the Labour Party would have, and we will deal with them as we go through committee, hopefully in the coming weeks, months on this. We've gone through an awful lot of societal change in the last few years, colleagues, and Irish people have always come through a process and showed their caring nature, no matter what their opinions on very, very sensitive issues. We've gone also through a very tough 6 months in relation to COVID, and many people have questioned their own mortality, and we've had different forms of conversations around our kitchen tables. When a loved one becomes sick with a serious illness and the end of their life is nearing, we all want to do whatever we can to help them and stop their pain and suffering. Improving end-of-life care and providing outlets for dying with dignity are imperative. This issue, I believe, cannot be kicked down the road any longer, and I want to acknowledge the work of Gail O'Rourke. I want to acknowledge what she did and the sacrifices she made. And I also want to acknowledge Marie Fleming and Tom Curran. We all know Marie's story. While she was in the final stages of multiple sclerosis and her landmark case in the Supreme Court, she challenged the state's legal ban on assisted suicide. We know that she lost her battle, but her spirit, what she advocated for, it's her spark that has ignited this discussion and brought us to where we are tonight, and her campaign is ongoing, and she's kick-started a national debate on these matters, which will be her lasting legacy. I've said many times in this House that I have met one of the bravest women many of us, I suppose, have ever heard in this country, or had the privilege of meeting, and I've become a good friend of hers, and that is Vicky Phelan. And I listened very closely to Vicky Phelan. I know the proposer of the bill does and did as well. And I was reassured by her stance, by the long conversations, multiple conversations I had with her. I spoke to Vicky. I speak to her every week, but I spoke to her earlier today, and she asked me to read something into the Dáil record tonight. So the following words are not mine. The following words are Vicky Phelan's. You have been asked to debate a very important bill this evening, the Dying with Dignity Bill. I understand there will be many of you who may not agree with this and what the bill proposes, assisted dying. However, all that I am asking of you is to park your own views on this issue for a moment and consider this. Imagine that you are dying from an incurable cancer. You are still relatively young, with young children. You do not want to die, yet you know that barring a miracle, that this is not going to happen. You do not know how long you have left, yet all you can think about is dying and leaving your children behind. You know that people suffering from the same cancer who have died before you endured a lot of pain in their final weeks. Indeed, you have sat with some of these patients in their final weeks and watched them and their loved ones suffer unnecessarily while they waited for the last breath. You will never forget the sound of the death rattle, a sound that you know is facing you when your time comes, and which haunts you when you imagine your young children having to witness this. Now, imagine that there is another way. Imagine that you can choose to control the circumstances of your inevitable death. And imagine that by virtue of this bill, that you are allowed to die gently, at home, surrounded by your family and friends, when your time is nearing its end. I do not have to imagine. This is what this Dying with Dignity bill would do for me and my family. I do not want to die. I am not choosing between living and dying. My cancer is incurable. The option of living will no longer be available to me in the not-too-distant future. I just want to be allowed to have the choice to control the circumstances of my death, much as I have made decisions about my own life. Please, I ask all of you who have a free vote on this issue, do not vote for the amendment proposed by Cabinet and Government to send this bill to a special committee to be scrutinised for another 12 months. Vote for this bill to go through to the second stage and allow for pre-legislative scrutiny to take place now, not in 12 months' time. Do not kick this issue down the road for another 12 months. Please, voting for this bill would bring a huge amount of comfort and clarity to people like me who know they are going to die and die with a certain amount of suffering and pain. Allow people to make choice for themselves. Not my words, Vicky Phelan's words. Colleagues, we all know that this is not a black and white issue. We all know there will be grey areas. We all know we'll have to go through this legislation in huge amount of detail. We all know we will change parts of the legislation. The proposer is very much open towards that. We all know there are concerns about people who will be considered vulnerable and that people could potentially be taken advantage of. We all know there will be checks and balances that will have to be put in place. And we in the Labour Party value people's dignity above all else and want to ensure that everybody is protected and everyone can have the fullest life that they deserve. This is not something that is a replacement for palliative care. Please don't anyone stand up here and say that this is a replacement for palliative care. I don't believe anyone in this House should do so, because that is not what we are dealing with. There are a number of legal issues, a number of issues in the bill which will have to be changed. And these issues refer to, for instance, Section 2 of the 1993 Suicide Act prohibits aiding, abetting, counselling or procuring the suicide of another person. This bill is concerned with removing that ban. However, Section 12 of the bill seems to override Section 2 of the 1993 Act in its entirety. I think that this obviously is an issue that will have to be dealt with as we go through this in committee stage. And there is another issue in relation to Section 12 of the bill that states that nothing in the Criminal Law Act of 93 makes unlawful the provision of assistance in accordance with this bill. But this bill is in fact concerned with more than just providing assistance. It authorises in circumstances the direct administration of certain substances by the attending physician. So we're going to have to deal with that as well. Supporting this bill is a brave stance to take, and I'm glad to be a member of this House that is standing here supporting this bill with colleagues from across all different forms of politics. And I would urge anybody to consider this bill very, very deeply as they make up their mind, and consider the people who are advocating for it, and the fact, most of all, that we have to deal with this legislation as legislators in a very timely fashion. So please support the bill and do not support the government's amendment. Thank you.